So you're unofficially on the air.
Great.
Okay.
Welcome.
I want to see if who accepts the stream. Okay, Twitch has accepted the stream. YouTube has accepted the stream. Now I got to wait for Facebook.
Always last.
Yep. Okay, Facebook has accepted the stream.
Great.
Now they will give me the link. So stand by and I'll send it to both of you. Okay, they have given me the link. Can I send it to you both through Facebook Messenger?
Sure. Thank you.
Okay, that's
Absolutely.
easiest. Carol, what's your Facebook name? Just your regular name, or do you have something fancy?
I don't think so.
Well, I'll tell you what. I'll send it to you through voicemail. I mean through text message.
Okay, thank you. That'll be fine.
Here is the link. I'll send it to you, and then you can give it to Dave. Okay?
Sure.
Okay. Okay, sent.
Oh.
This is the part of the show we call getting shared up.
Okay.
Okay, how do I share it now? From here. That gave me a live link. Man. Are you sending it out? Are we live?
Yeah, well, you're live, but your show hasn't started. This is called the sharing up
Right.
part of the
okay.
show.
Okay. Do you want me to send it, Dave?
Yeah, when I click on what you sent me, it just goes right to
You got your
Facebook.
first comment.
Is it from my aunt?
Is that your aunt?
No, from Arlen.
Oh,
Smart Alex.
So she can hear you, so just tell her the answer.
hey, Arlen. Yes, we are starting momentarily. Thanks for joining us. That's awesome.
Okay. Got the link.
Yeah, you got the same thing I got.
Well, now I've got something that I can share. So I'll find out from
Up, Teresa's watching.
These are all your friends.
Hey, Terry. Welcome, my friend. Yeah, of course.
Kelly's watching.
Hi, Kelly. Welcome. I'm so glad everybody's here.
Wow, the gang is here. They keep coming in.
That's our first cousin, Andy. Hello, Andy.
got your first comedic comment.
Of course, that's a friend of mine.
That's just what I said.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I think they're all on Facebook respite, getting a well-needed break.
Okay. There's Aunt Rocky. Hi, Aunt Rocky. Okay.
Tell me when you're ready. When you're all shared up.
One more. All right.
Okay, so you'll notice that in between you, there's the number 3.
Yes.
As the show goes on, it's going to look like this. See, it's going to be a timer telling you how much time is left in the show.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So, and then when you switch to VIN 9, it'll be down in the corner. All right?
Okay.
Okay, so you understand that.
Yes.
I think you have all your training ready, and Jackie wants to know if the volume can be turned up. It would be turned up on her end. You know, we aren't the ones that turn the volume up. She turns it up on her phone.
Okay. So, Jackie, hopefully you heard that. You need to turn up the volume on your phone or on your device. And Jackie is going to share with her siblings.
Wonderful.
Yes.
Okay. So, when it says in the timer window there,
Mm-hmm.
on the air, you are on the air. You ready to start?
Yes.
Here we go.
Ready, Dave?
Yep.
Okay. Good evening from Buffalo, New York. My name is Carol Schmeidler,
I'm Dave Schmeidler.
and we're here to talk about our father, Max Schmeidler. How many of you know the stories of your parents? How many of you know where they came from? Oh, we'll turn my volume up. That a little better? Okay, I've just turned my volume up. So, anyway, how many of you know about your parents? How many of your parents survived something that they didn't talk about and you didn't know about? We knew very little about our dad when we were growing up. He would mention certain things, not much about his youth and how he came to this country. And he built a life for himself. So this is his story. I have been doing this presentation for a group called the Holocaust Education Resource Organization in Buffalo, New York, when we get requests from schools. And we wanted to share this with you. Thank you very much to Richard Wicca and Think Twice Radio. And I'm going to put the PowerPoint presentation on now, and we'll do some narration. And feel free to comment, ask questions, anything you want. Okay, so if you recognize, well, I don't know if you recognize anybody in this picture, but that's the two of us. I'm going to turn my volume down just a little bit. Okay. You got it?
All right.
Okay. So that's Mom and Dad and Dave and me. We were very well-dressed children. Dad sold infants and children's clothing and toys. So like I said, there were a lot of things that we didn't know about our father and about his family. They're kind of open questions that we have not gotten resolved. We've found out a lot actually since he died, and he passed away in 1981. And we didn't know that a lot of documents existed that he had been able to take with him on his travels all over the world. So we'll show you some of them and tell you about more of them. This is Dad. He was a pretty handsome guy, 6'3 3/4" in stocking feet, he used to say. And we are finding out more information as we go through documents and as online archives open up also. So the basics. He was born on October 22nd, 1920 in Berlin. in Charlottenburg, we believe, which is kind of southwest in Berlin. He was the only child of Bernhard and Laura Hammer Schmeidler that we know of. Our grandfather was born in 1891 in Brześć. Our grandmother was born in 1900 in Andrzejów. And keep note that those are both Polish cities, and they were born in Poland, and they had Polish passports. So did our father. This is from the Berlin phone book. I believe it was 1937, something like that. It's pretty amazing that Berlin digitized, well, phone books. There weren't a lot of phones, of course, at the time, but addresses and businesses. So the highlighted yellow entry is Schmeidler Bernhard, and it says Gemeinde Ledergroßhandler, which means leather, and he had a store. Pretty cool. That was actually a good way to figure out the times that they lived in Berlin and when they kind of dropped out of the phone books, when things happened actually the next year after this, 1938. So in the early years, the family owned a leather business and an apartment building in Berlin. My father had to leave school in 1936 because Jewish children were not allowed to go to school anymore. But he apprenticed to study in the leather business in Berlin and then in Poland until February of 1938. So keep in mind, in 1936, he was 15, 16 years old. 1938, 17, 18 years old. He went back to Berlin to study chemistry and leather in 1938 and then went to Poland. In 1939, he went to Leather Sellers Technical College in London, England, which actually exists now still, under a different name. And if you look at the pictures on the right, that is our dad holding a piece of newly dyed or stretched leather on the top and leaning over a vat of something on the bottom. And being a safety professional myself, I asked him if he ever wore personal protective equipment because there are a lot of nasty chemicals. And he looked at me like I was nuts and said, "We wear gloves sometimes." So that was Dad. This is the middle school that our father attended in Berlin. It was called the Jüdisches Gymnasium Moses Mendelssohn, and the old name above the entrance was Knabenschule Jüdischen Gemeinde. This building still exists. It is still used as a school, and I took this picture when I was in Berlin 2 summers ago. I'll tell you a little bit more about that later, but look at the heavy security in front of the building. It's still used as a school, not necessarily by only Jewish children, but heavy security. So some of the documents that Dad had in German after the war, he and his parents were trying to get restitution. They were trying to get medical bills paid for, and they told their stories on these documents that they never told to Dave or me, or possibly even our mother. So I'll just read a little bit. At the end of October 1938, as a Jew, I was picked up by the police in my parents' apartment at Horst Wesselstrasse 10 in Berlin and taken to the German-Polish border between Katowice and Bytom in a mass deportation. So a couple things here. Again, at the end of October 1938, he was 18 years old, rousted from his parents' home, not knowing what would happen to him. Taken to the German-Polish border. Again, he was a Polish citizen traveling on a Polish passport in Germany. So the Germans didn't want him, the Poles didn't want him. This was about 2 weeks, perhaps, before Kristallnacht, which hopefully you've all heard about. Also, Horst Wesselstrasse. If you've ever heard of a man named Horst Wessel, he was a minor Nazi soldier, I guess you could say, who was murdered in 1930, supposedly, he was murdered by 2 people, maybe, I can't remember who, but one of the sources I read was that he never paid his rent and his landlord murdered him. Either way, he was made into a martyr by the Nazis and elevated to almost deity status, and this street that my grandparents and father lived on was named after a Nazi. So, pretty bad stuff. He continued, apart from 10 Reichsmarks and clothing on my body, the police did not allow me to take anything with me. After weeks in no man's land, the Polish authorities let me into Poland. So, again, 18 years old, don't know where his parents are, nothing with him. Back in Berlin, on October 28th, 1938, so again, about 2 weeks before Kristallnacht, my father was dragged out of bed and is a Jew of painful nationality. And I believe, again, that means that he was Polish. The Germans didn't want him in Germany. The Poles didn't want him in Poland. He was deported to the Polish border. From Poland, my father then managed to go to England for a student certificate and attend the Leather Sellers Technical College there. The Poland Aktion was the arrest and expulsion of about 17,000 Polish Jews living in Germany, in Nazi Germany, in October 1938. So, what do you do? Where do you go? This was the ID card that our grandfather had, and I actually do have that with me. It is a document that our family still possesses. And you can see all the seals on it and the pictures. Pretty serious looking man. Unfortunately, I never met him. He passed away before I was born. You probably don't remember him, Dave?
No.
Yeah. This is the timeline of what happened to my grandfather, Bernard. And, of course, it's not a tight timeline. There was transport time and how they got to the places they got to, why they went to the places they went to, who they knew, what happened to them, we really don't know. But between 38 and 39, he was deported from Berlin to Zbączkin, and I'm sure you Polish speakers, pardon my accent. From 39 until 1940, he was deported to Lemberg, which I believe is German. And from 1940 through 1945, my grandfather, grandmother, and my grandmother's family were in Srebrenica work camp in Russia. Yeah. Russia. Siberia. Thank you. Siberia. Brain freeze. Sorry. So that's what happened to my grandfather. Again, how they went there, why they went there, we don't know. Leaving Europe, my father received a message from his parents that they were sent to Siberia, but they would meet him in Shanghai. So my father left England, traveled through Canada on a transit visa in 1940, again, 19 or 20 years old. He had a book of postcards that he collected on his travels through the U.S. and Canada, and I saw it briefly, and it disappeared. He arrived in Shanghai in July of 1940 at the age of 19. And Dave, feel free to chime in if you have any comments or recollections that I don't have.
Of course.
Okay. Again, in the summer of 1940, in order not to be interned or forced into the Army, I went from London to Shanghai without having finished my training. So he attended about a year's worth of Leather Sellers Technical Institute. There I had to take up an apartment in the ghetto under extremely unsanitary conditions. And again, how they picked China, how they were able to go to China, how my dad was able to make it, but his parents weren't, we don't know. And we will probably never know. The Schmeidlers and family remained in Siberia. My father didn't see his family for about 9 years. They didn't know where he was. He didn't know where they were. And Dad, when he first arrived in Shanghai, worked for Shanghai Defense Forces as a canvasser for this magazine. So he sold advertising, he sold subscriptions. Dad he did what he had to do to survive all the way through. And the things that we learned just increased our respect for him so much. So much. Why Shanghai? Well, Shanghai was considered the city of last resort. There were no immigrant quotas for Jews. There were 3 waves of Jewish immigration to Shanghai or to China in general. One was pre-1900, the second one was World War I, third one was World War II. And approximately 20,000 people were saved by moving to Shanghai. Now, again, it was the place of last resort. It was crowded, it was dirty, there was a lot of disease, there wasn't enough food, there weren't enough jobs. Shanghai was a pretty wild city at the time. Different countries controlled different sectors of China, and a lot of crime, a lot of disease, kidnappings, robberies, very common, murders. And then, of course, you have the Japanese invasion of China, which is another very interesting thing because as bad as things were, the Japanese never herded up the Jews in China and sent them to concentration camps. It's very interesting. Our father somehow joined the Shanghai Municipal Police in 1941. And this is a copy of his work rules. Let me get the mouse out of there so you can see better. Okay. His pay was $228 per month. And I'm not sure what kind of dollars those were. I don't think they were American dollars, maybe Chinese dollars. Worth not much. But he got a job. And this is what he did to support himself. This is him in his formal uniform. So one of the things that we did find in all of the documents and things was the pin on his cap. And I can move the mouse over there. Yeah, this pin. Didn't know what it was until a friend of mine who was in the military was able to tell me. This is his work uniform, pith helmet, shorts, scrawny legs.
I inherited.
6'3" 3/4" and stocking feet. And this is him after hours. So quite a striking man. And again, he did what he had to do. Another thing that we found out, Andy, Dad was born in 1920, so he was 21 years old in 1941. Another thing that we found after he died that I don't remember him talking about. Did he say anything to you about this? Dave?
The medal?
The medal? Yeah.
I don't remember.
Yeah, I really don't remember, but we found this newspaper article from 1941 saying that he received a citation for bravery in an attempted kidnapping, an armed robbery. He and 2 Chinese constables who were unfortunately not named. And we think he might have killed someone. We're not sure. We never had guns in the house, anything like that. But the Shanghai Municipal Police were pretty famous. They were around from the 1800s, I believe late 1800s, through probably the Revolution. And there was a man who worked for the Shanghai Municipal Police named William Fairbairn. I think he was gone by the time Dad got there, but he kind of created the first SWAT teams and created a whole different style of self-defense and gunfighting. So pretty famous. So that's what our father learned, apparently, when he was in Shanghai. Unfortunately, he was not immune to disease, and at the age of 22 or 23 in 1943, he contracted polio, encephalitis, dysentery, and all those awful things. He lost the use of 3 limbs for almost a year, and he was able to recover in a convent, and that kind of was all he said about Shanghai. In addition to the rats being big as cats, he recovered in a convent and said that the nuns saved his life, and I believe that was early physical therapy. We do have a question. Did he speak Chinese? Yes, he did. He spoke a couple of different dialects of Chinese. And Andy, I don't know if you ever went to a Chinese restaurant with him. You would try to order in Chinese and nobody ever knew what he was saying. But he spoke Chinese. He spoke a couple of dialects of Indian, about 8 other languages. So that was through the end of the war. These were newspapers that we found with all of his documents. I'll talk about his documents in a couple minutes. But this newspaper was from September 3rd, I believe, 1945. And this is the Japanese surrendering, solemnly signed aboard U.S. battleship Missouri. That is the paper from the day of the Japanese surrender. It's pretty amazing. And it was in good shape because it was folded up in a paper bag in my mom's house for probably 40 years, 45 years. This is another newspaper, Long Live Allied Victory. So there were some papers. I don't know where he got it. I don't know if this was printed in Shanghai. I believe it might have been. But even the colors are intact. It's beautiful. And this is from September 7th, 1945. So He recorded all that. And that's for us. After 1945, he continued to recover. And he stayed in Shanghai and worked for the U.S. quartermaster until 1946. I actually did find the ship that he took from Shanghai. He went to Petaluma, California, and worked in a tannery there for a while. He tried to anglicize his name. He called himself Mike Schmeidler. Why? I don't know. He went from Petaluma to Milwaukee, Wisconsin, stayed in Milwaukee for a couple of years. And meanwhile, his parents were in a displaced persons camp in Bamberg, Germany, and then they came to Buffalo. And in the documents that we found, there is a letter from our dad to immigration, I guess it was, saying that he would support his parents. They would have a place to stay, a clean apartment in Milwaukee, and they would be supported. No one would be dependent on the U.S. government to support them. That's what they did then. He moved to Buffalo and reunited with his parents in 1949. He became a citizen in 1951 and met my mom in 1954, and they got married in December 54. What a cute couple, huh? 2 children, my brother and me. My grandfather died in 1957, so unfortunately I never got to know him. He died before I was born. My Oma, our grandmother, died in 1975, and unfortunately the war was tough. It was very tough for all of them, and they retained physical, emotional, mental scars forever. Our grandmother had Parkinson's. Oh, and by the way, when she was in Siberia, she had to sell her gold teeth for corn to eat. And being a rather well-off person from Berlin, corn was usually beneath them, so they never ate corn, but she had to sell her gold fillings for corn. She became ill with Parkinson's and went into a nursing home in about 1974, and she would sit at the payphones, if you remember what payphones are, and bum dimes from people to call our house and say goodbye because the Nazis were taking her away. I don't know if you remember that, Dave. I remember that pretty clearly.
No, I don't.
Yeah.
Boy.
Yeah, it was tough on Mom because our father traveled a lot. Dad worked as a traveling salesman. He spoke about 7 languages. And from the time the war ended and the time that he reunited with his parents, I think actually even before then, they tried to get compensation for the apartment building in Berlin. And the apartment building was in a place, part of Berlin called Prenzlauer Berg in the northeast of Berlin. I believe, again, they lived in Charlottenburg in the southwest, but they tried to get compensation for this apartment building forever. And they retained attorneys. I know my father never went back to Germany. I don't think his parents ever went back to Germany. And they retained attorneys, and the attorneys contacted the apartment building. But of course, the apartment building was in East Berlin after the war, and anything in East Berlin was owned by the government, not privately owned. So we have years of papers of who lived in which apartment, how much rent they paid, and how much money was spent on maintenance of the building. And really, I would say who gives a hoot, but I would say it a lot stronger if we weren't on the air, Richard. You see the picture to the right. That isn't a very unhappy-looking me, but I went to Berlin 2 summers ago at the end of a nice trip and did some family research, and this is the door of the apartment building that our family owned that was stolen from them. We actually still have the documents that we believe that the Nazis used to take the property, and that was in 1937, 1938. It has all the wax seals of the Nazis and the impressions on the paper. I haven't had it translated. A lot of it's very difficult to read, but that's the apartment building that they worked for years and years to get compensated for. After the wall fell, my mother got a one-time take-it-or-leave-it offer, probably for pennies on the dollar, but she took it in the late 80s, and that kept her afloat for as long as she needed.
And Dad had passed about 10 years at that time.
Yes. So he was never able to see it, nor his parents were. But my father remained religious. He remained religious throughout all of this. And Oma, his mother, was religious. Apparently his father was not very religious, which I didn't know, again, because we never met him. But the health issues that he had just became more and more serious. And he developed post-polio in the 1960s after being stricken in the early 40s. And that meant polio was a virus, and the virus reactivated. So it was wasting his muscles away. It was very difficult for him. His balance was poor. And he was a traveling salesman, so he was away from home a lot and lugging around sample cases to vendors, or just to stores. Later life, unfortunately, my father died November 2nd, 1981 of cancer, and he was diagnosed at the end of the end of July, and passed away at the beginning of November. So by then he was tired, he was sore, he was sick at the age of 61, which from this perspective was way too damn young. Way too damn young. But he left a legacy for us. He left a family, and he created a family, and many of his family members survived. We don't really know about his father's side of the family. We know some cousins, but we don't really know why my grandfather went to Germany. We don't know if the family business was leather tanning. We just don't know enough about them. We know a little bit more about his mother's side of the family and who survived. We did hear that one of my grandmother's sisters and her family were shot in the streets by the Nazis. Remember, always remember, remember. Documents saved and donated. So we didn't know about a lot of these documents. He saved his elementary school report cards. He saved almost every job recommendation from every employer that he had. Why do you think he did that? Okay, comments. Let's see comments.
And we have them.
And we have them. Well,
that's the point. The documents that Lynn spoke of, the seizure documents, are like brand new.
Yeah.
Like brand new.
Yeah. I hand carried some of the documents to the Holocaust Museum in Washington about 9 years ago and donated them, and they made a very nice archival quality copy of the documents. So they are available for, they've been digitized. They're not really going to be exhibited, but they're available for study and review. And his story, I mean, he never talked about it. It was very emotional for him, anything like that. I remember, I don't think I was there, but I remember hearing that he was on a plane and he heard people speaking German, and he went up to them and said, "You murdered my family." You don't remember that either?
No.
I remember all these kind of anecdotal things. I remember the family getting together and talking in German or in Polish, in languages that we just didn't understand. And I often wonder what he would think about us doing stuff like this, like me talking to hundreds of school kids about his story and telling personal things. But he left the documents for a reason. And he left the legacy for a reason. And I have to think that it's because it was too painful for him to talk about, but he wanted people to know his story. He wanted people to remember. And the documents and the report cards and the job recommendations were to legitimize him, right? He needed the documentation, right? Jackie says that her dad saved stuff too. They needed the documentation for future jobs, but I think that grounded them in a way that they were not grounded for so much of their lives. Just my thought. The two stones you see on the right, I collected when I was in Europe 2 summers ago. And one of them, I believe it was the bottom one, was from a park in Berlin. Many parks all over Berlin, many monuments all over Berlin. And I put that on his headstone when we came back from Germany. So to show him that I was there. The top stone, we went to Theresienstadt, the concentration camp in the Czech Republic. And maybe I should have not taken it, but I did. It was a pretty awful place. And I donated that to the local Buffalo Holocaust Memorial at one of the cemeteries. So that's there. And just a quick story about that. We were at Theresienstadt, and we were saying some prayers outside of the concentration camp proper where there's a cemetery. And while we were doing that, there was a young couple and a little boy, and the little boy was kind of acting like little boys do, running around. And the woman took him on her knee. I gave her my prayer book, and she was saying the prayers with her little boy. And we started talking after, and the woman was Israeli, and her grandfather survived Theresienstadt, and she wanted her son to see the place. So that's a victory. That's a victory. My father won. He won. He created a family. He had a life. All good. That's Dad and me over here. And he was very superstitious, so he hardly ever looked at the camera. You see most of the pictures of him, never looked at the camera. This is Mom and my brother and me a few summers ago at our nephew's wedding. This is Mom and Dad. They went to Israel to visit family. Mom doesn't look terribly happy, does she, Dave?
A little out of place, I would think.
Well, maybe a little out of place, but these were my grandmother's brothers, here and here, and I believe sisters, here and here. And my wedding picture. And this is Dave's bar mitzvah, right?
Think so.
Yeah. And Oma is right in the middle, my father's mother. So,
Photobombing us.
Photobombing, yeah, yeah. And other cousins back here. So, pretty cool picture. The documents, again, I hand carried them to the Holocaust Museum in Washington, D.C. That is the website. And take a look at them if you want to. It's the Max Schmeidler Archives. That's all you have to Google. So that would be fine. And actually, that is it for the PowerPoint. I'm going to put us on. There we go. And comments. Thank you for our beautiful family. Thank you. Does anybody have any questions? No. Dave, do you have any comments? Any stories from that you remember?
I didn't know where to start with any of those. It was really interesting growing up with him, not sharing so many things. As you commented about the family gatherings on his side were mostly conducted in a language that we didn't understand.
Right.
It always sparked the imagination as to what was going on. Now, Oma did not want to learn English, I thought.
Right. I remember the Reader's Digests in German.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
So the opening up of all these things in the years, and especially in the last few years, it's astounding, and it's incredible. The heroism, the cunning that he used
Yes.
to enable himself to go on that journey.
Yes.
And you know, he was more than a salesman.
Much more.
He was you know, made, I think, to be a salesman. But you know how he managed all these things.
Yeah.
I'm forever in awe, and finding out a lot of his friends, a lot of the family friends on that side were survivors that we didn't hear about.
Yes.
That a few of them began doing what you're doing. The actual survivors themselves, going out and speaking after 50 years.
Yes.
They were going out and speaking in public.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, look at this.
Yeah. Hi, John.
Hello, John.
Hi, John. I've seen you on Facebook. Yeah. Let me answer a couple. Well, and just one comment. I don't know about you, but I feel like such a shit about the way I was as a teenager. You know, we were all self-absorbed in our little Tonawanda, New York life, and we didn't know any of this. And I would hope that I would have been nicer or different. But I mean, we were American kids, and what he went through was totally unrelatable. And after the war, they didn't know. There was no post-traumatic stress counseling. There was no grief counseling. It was pretty much shut up, get on with your life, and don't talk about it because people don't want to hear. They couldn't believe it. It was too awful. So there was a lot of anger in Dad, right below the surface. Didn't take much to bring it out.
Very true.
Yeah, and
Very true.
so Andy, I believe you asked a question about compensation. They did get money for the apartment. Dad did get a small amount of restitution every month. He couldn't prove that he worked in Germany, so he didn't get any like Social Security from the German government. But he also tried to have his medical bills covered by the German government. And if you remember Dad, he was pretty forceful in the things that he would say. Okay, and person from a Shanghai reunion group, what this could have been for, the Japanese were making lists to round up the Jews. But they didn't round them up, so I don't really know. I don't really know what happened. Yes, he was what, Andy? Oh, he was pretty forceful? Yes, he was pretty forceful. And a good salesman, right? Yeah. And John and Jackie, thank you for your comments. I asked a person from Shanghai reunion group what this could have been for, and she said the Japanese were making the list to round up Jews. But they didn't, as far as we were there, or as far as we know. And the area that he lived in Shanghai, I believe, is no longer there. But I had a friend who was in Shanghai within the last 10 years, and there is a museum in Shanghai dedicated to the Jewish immigrants there. So.
And for anybody who doesn't know, Jackie and John's father was a friend of our father's.
In Shanghai, right? And they moved to the Oregon area, and they remained friends. I have pictures of Dad in Egon and Carolyn's wedding, and your father, Jackie, was my father's best man, and he was taking pictures all through their rehearsal dinner, and then realized at the end of the dinner that there was no film in the camera. Yeah. Did my father have Chinese friends, or did the Jews and Chinese stay separate?
Never knew.
No. We have pictures in the album of him with Chinese people, some Chinese people, but we don't have names for anybody, so we don't really know. Yes, that was your father. But they remained friends throughout. Your father, unfortunately, passed away a little bit before our dad did, and they remained friends forever, which was awesome. It was awesome, that connection, and I think your mom stayed in touch with my mom for at least a while. Yeah. So, do you have any other comments? Thank you, Aunt Rocky. Yeah. Dad stayed religious. Yes.
And he tried to impress that on me, and I was resistant.
Mm-hmm.
Those things. Again, things we didn't understand, things we didn't know.
Right.
But that could be another whole show. We were talking about that before.
Yeah.
I've made a bunch of notes on things and don't want to go there.
Right.
Don't want to
Right.
go there. Next time.
Yeah. A lot of the family that you see, well, kind of in the background of the middle picture. Here, let's do this. Let's go back to the PowerPoint.
Thank you, Jackie.
PowerPoint, picture in picture. Okay, so we can see that. A lot of the people in the middle picture, a lot of the family moved to Israel, stayed in Buffalo for a while, and then moved to Israel. And I've been there once. I saw Dad's first cousin and his wife, who I had never met. I was fortunate enough, privileged enough to meet them, and they didn't talk about it either. Our cousin Freddie didn't really speak much English. My German was nicht so good, not too good. His wife spoke English and French, a little bit of Hebrew, so we kind of got by, but he would not talk about anything. The conversation kind of went, so Freddie, you were in Siberia when Dad was in China. Yes. Were you okay? Yes. How did you get out? Silence. So people didn't talk about it. Yeah. Thank you, TJ. Thank you. And Jackie, your dad never really talked about it either. Yeah. So.
Oh, Andy.
Don't make me cry.
You know, we could talk about how we couldn't watch Hogan's Heroes at the house. Boy, he would explode.
But I thought he laughed at it. No?
I don't remember that.
I thought he laughed so hard he cried because all the Nazis were supposed to be Dummkopfs. I don't know. But yeah, we had to watch what we saw on TV and not watch anything that would upset me. I just wonder what he and my grandparents and all the family would have thought about what's going on today in the world. It's awful. Awful.
But again, that's another show.
Yes, it is.
The idea is to spread the word of this and of this lesson in history.
Mm-hmm. And what people have to do to overcome hate. Yeah.
Exactly, Paul. Exactly. Those are things that we found out. Well, explain about Manya, my godmother.
So our cousin Manya and her husband Ignaz were, they both had families. Their families were murdered, and they met in a displaced person camp. I believe, Naomi, please correct me, Tamara, Menashe, correct me if I'm wrong, they met and married and had 2 children, and Alicia and Jack were brought over to this country, and they lived in Buffalo. Manya had a catering business in her basement. This is what you're getting at, Dave? So Manya's partner in the catering business and her husband were on Schindler's List. And I know her daughter, actually. I know their daughter from our synagogue. Never talked about it. We never knew about it. Had no idea. So a number of years ago, I was telling another friend and her husband about this, and the husband looked at me and said, "My father was also on the list." Floored me. Never knew. And if you've seen the movie, at the end of the movie, someone hands Schindler a set of keys for a car. That was her father. So, yeah. Paul, there are still Nazis everywhere, young people who are indoctrinated without a true understanding of what it meant. Absolutely. Absolutely. They think it's fun, it's fashionable. It's fashionable to hate Jews. It's fashionable to hate anybody who's different from you, to blame other people for things that are not right with society, that could be corrected, that you could be doing better. And scapegoating is still here. Unfortunately, hatred is still here. It's terrible. Our rabbi at our shul needs to continually have police on parking lot and security building for services. The synagogue that I belong to has an armed police officer at every event. Yes, unfortunately, that's the way it is now. So, I belong to a group called the Holocaust Educational Resource Organization, and they are in Buffalo. I'm sure there are groups all over the country like this, but we take requests from schools for speakers. And I just started doing this in January. My first speaking engagement was at a private school in Buffalo for about 400 people. And I spoke for Hillel at the University of Buffalo. I had about 100 people there. And I've done a few more, and we're actually meeting in September for the fall. And I hope to do this much more. Anybody who will listen. So, thank you. Lynch Schmeidler, what we're doing now is important as related to the world today. I believe this is why your dad left these documents and raised you to be brave enough, thank you, to speak out and quell the hate. Thank you. We did too, and yeah. Thank you. We really appreciate your support. We really appreciate your attendance. And do we have any other comments? Or Dave, do you have any other comments?
I don't think so. I so appreciate the comments.
Yes. Andy, at a 2018 a school for the behavior middle school start. He was fortunate enough to teach them about World War II and the Holocaust. They had no idea. Hey, Andy, if you want any pictures or any stories, let us know. Thank you. Thank you, Orlin. Today would have been your dad's 96th birthday. Oh, Paul. Paul. That would have been wonderful. Thank you, Ben. And there are other people whose parents and grandparents had stories that were heart-wrenching and amazing. And we'd like to get them to do podcasts also. I'd like this to be a series, and I will be talking to them and talking to the Hero organization about that. So anybody with a story or with a comment, please join us. Anything else?
No.
Okay.
No. Thank you again, everyone.
Thank you again. I got through this without crying, without saying something really stupid. So thank you very much, everybody. We love you all.
Bye.
Bye.